Hello, this is James Qua, and welcome to the second U413 client video, in which I will explain the code. So, I'll explain it sort of assuming you don't know Bash, but you do know general programming. So, I'll go through it rather quickly, and hopefully this can help you understand how to make your own client, be it in Bash or some other language like Python. So, this right here you'll be familiar. It's called a crunch bang. These two lines right there, and that is the path after the crunch bang to the Bash, which is the interpreter. You could do anything. It could be any interpreter you want. It could be said, but for this it's a Bash script, so it uses Bash. That's just how Unix works when you execute it. It'll look at this line and it'll give everything after that line to Bash as a script. Anyway, this, as you should already know, is the GPL. It means that you could use this, you could distribute it, you could do whatever you want as long as you give people the same freedoms. These don't really mean anything. They're just there for me internally, though this name in this version I do use in the user string that the browser gets. Anyway, some Bash specific stuff, but you should understand it as a normal programmer. This right here, as you could read from the comment, it checks if the dot file. If you're not familiar with Unix, this little tilde right here, what that means is the user's home directory. So I'll explain that. In Unix, there's a home directory, and in that you have all the users. So right now it's just James, but if I added another user, there would be different directories. Now, this one points to your own home directory. It will always be yours. So if I'm a different user, it'll be that home directory. Now, that means that the client can be used by multiple users, and it'll only load files from their home directories, so it could be used by different people without interfering. So that's what it does. And inside the U413 client dot file is, of course, the SID. And what it does, this dot right here, it's an alias to source. So it means source this, and what that means is that just add it as if it's part of the code. And right there, it's just Bash code, and all it does is set a variable. So that's all we needed to do. Anyway, parse is what's really doing the real work. I'll explain this in my next video, but to make a U413 client, all you need is something that connects to the internet and something that can parse JSON somehow, or extract a key, which is what I'm doing, and then print it out somehow, which is basically any language, and you should be able to do it within an hour and make a decent client. But basically what this does, I'm not going to explain all of grep and sed to you because it won't be very useful, but from a programmer standpoint, it's very hard, if not impossible, to make a parser of JSON using just regexes, because it's not a structured language. It doesn't have a lot of syntax. It's just this, and languages that are recursive and have a lot of, different curly braces or parentheses or whatever are generally hard to parse using regexes. Anyway, however, what I can do is extract a key, and so all that I'm doing for this is extracting a key, and what I'm going to extract is either text, which will just print out U413's text, the output, or the SID to get the new SID. I'll also print out the command string so that I know what to put on before the prompt. So when I say login, it says login username before that little arrow. So that would be the command string, I think, but you'll see it later. This isn't that important. All that it does is it replaces new lines, because what shows up, what I get sent back is a literal new line. So it'll show up as a \n, and other things will show up as that too, such as for example, a single quote will show up as this Unicode, and then as this Unicode, and then this arrow will show up as this Unicode, this greater than symbol. Anyway, send is easy. And again, this shows how easy it is to write a U413 client. All you need is just something that'll send something with some variables to U413. Now, you might think that get variables have limits. Well, that's not exactly true. What sets those limits is generally the browsers. Some servers set those limits, but nowadays most don't, and they're about the same as post. So if you're using something like wget or a browser that doesn't choose to set limits on get strings, then you can send as much as you like. So it's pretty much the same as post, it's just a little bit easier. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm using the user agent. There you go, user string, not user agent, user agent, not user string. And it's just the name, which is U413 client bash, and version, which is 1.1. And here, all you do is send it to api.u413.com. Now, in bash, if a variable does not exist, it will evaluate to nothing. Let me show you how that works. So, I have no variable called dog right now. So if I print out dog, it'll just be nothing. If I print out dog A, I'll just print out A. However, if I set dog to equal B, and I print that out, then it'll be BA. So it effectively just prints out nothing. So what that means is that I am potentially just sending this. Now U413, I was surprised to find, is smart enough to recognize this as you having no SID. So this is perfectly fine. And a lot of languages are like this, where, and this is good because you could set it so that it starts out as nothing until you get a value. So there you go. And then all I have to do is send whatever the variable CLI is, which you should be able to guess is just the text I enter into U413, like board 0. Anyway, we're almost done here. We're about 35% done. Hopefully it's not too boring. I'm sure you could read my comments, so some of this is a little bit redundant. But get new SID, what it does is it uses the parse function to parse, and in bash you don't send arguments to the function like you would in other languages by going there. Like, you don't be like int whatever. You actually send it just like you're sending an argument, just like echo blah. That's how you send an argument to echo, by a argument after it, instead of sending, echo duh. Can't do that. Anyway, so 1 will equal the JSON to parse, and this is the key. So parse looks for a key and the JSON to parse. Whoops. Anyway, so first it'll check if U413 client exists, and if it does, then it will use sed to first it checks if SID exists in the file. Like, say someone has a dummy U413 client file for some reason, it'll check if that exists, and if that does, then it'll just use sed to replace it with the new SID. If it doesn't, then it'll completely replace the U413 client, and also if it doesn't exist, it'll create a new one with the SID. Anyway, let's get into this. We're actually 90% done here because this is a redundant function. What here is basically, as you know, if we give U413 client an argument such as this, it will print out, okay, hold on. It will print out the output of that command, and it will leave. And this is what's doing that. This just takes it out of a loop. It says if I have any arguments. So this means is equal to an empty string, and this is, of course, as you should know as a programmer, the not operator. So if this exists, so if I have any arguments, then I'm going to send to U413 all the arguments I get, and then parse it, print it out. And I'm not going to explain it this time because I'll explain it this time, and that way I'll print I'll explain to you this thing, and then you'll understand the above, because that's all it's doing. Anyway, echo just gives it a new line, makes it look nicer. There you go, context text, not command string. Context text is what comes before the prompt. Anyway, first, this is a little bit advanced. What it's checking for is it's checking if it's been set, because in Bash it's pretty hard to find out if something is empty or if it's been set, and is just, or if it's just not set at all. It's hard to check that. So this is one way to do it. Anyway, so if context test is empty, which happens sometimes, like when you're first logging in, then don't worry about it. I don't want to grab new stuff from the server. But if it is unset, this is one thing that I'll explain to you. So say I log in, right? Now I go to board 0. So I leave that and I enter U413 client again. Now it's going to save my session without that, but in order for it to have that context text before that prompt, it needs to send it needs to get that data from U413 to see what it is, because I don't save that in the file. I could, but I don't do that right now. So I just notice if I don't have it, I'll just ask U413 what it is. Anyway, this is not how you're supposed to do it. Chevax actually in the API provides a Boolean value that tells you if it's a password field, but this is more efficient in Bash. Bash is a slow language. It's not meant for quick stuff that requires a lot of quick processing, like parsing JSON, for example. So I want to call it as few times as possible. So this, I'm just checking this because it's a lot more efficient, but it's not the best way. If you have a dedicated parser like you do for Python and most languages, use that and check the value of it. Check the Boolean value. Anyway, what SEP does just means don't echo my text back to me. EP, what the E there does is it means use read line. So that means I could type stuff and then I could go back and forward without having to delete all my stuff or worry about it. If I didn't have that, let me show you how it would look. So I could type stuff, but then if I tried to go back, it would print that stuff. With read line, it doesn't do that. So that's why I use that. Anyway, prompt simply asks what to do before you're entering data. And all I do is put context text, that, and then a space to make it look pretty. Then I save in a variable what U413 sends back to me. And then I parse it to see if my SID is expired. And if it is, then I unset it, because it's going to end up triggering this. So if it's not expired, then do nothing and continue on. If it is, get new SID. You got it. You could just read the code. And for every time I enter a command, it'll check if I have new context text. That's kind of hard to say, but yeah. Then clear the screen, and replace here is what prints everything out. And we're done. That was pretty long, pretty boring. I just went through code line by line, but that's what it is. And that's how it works. Hopefully you know how to make your own client now. Maybe you learned something. Sorry that you had to watch such a long thing. Alright, bye-bye.